This is NBC Nightly News. With John Chancellor in New York, David Brinkley in Washington, and tonight, segment 3, Chris Wallace's report on the House of Representatives on camera.
Good evening. The Chinese pushed on today in their invasion of Vietnam at 2 or 3 points and said the Vietnamese must feel our punishment. Some reports put the Chinese army 12 miles inside Vietnam, but these and most other details are unverified and at the moment unverifiable. We are told in Washington there is no sign of any Russian intention to move against China, and the Russians deny their forces have even been put on alert. We have a report from the Vietnamese side of the fighting coming by way of Jack Reynolds in Tokyo.
There's a great deal of confusion about what's happening in the war between China and Vietnam. This report from the first Western television newsman permitted near the Vietnamese side of the front was filed by Michael McClear for NBC News. He saw familiar scenes, refugees, this time North Vietnamese, fleeing from their former allies, the Chinese.
The evacuee buildup matches that of the troops. Only now, gradually, by buffalo and ox cart, or on foot, burdened by possessions and circumstance, have the evacuees become an exodus. I saw many hundreds in a few hours, stretched out and camped out as much as 40 miles from the front. This group say they were told 5 days earlier to leave and wait, and it's a waiting game. Only now have all civilians been ordered out of all border towns. Upwards of 100,000 just in this confined area of the 1,000-mile-long border.
Tuesday, McClear was in the provincial capital of Long Son, a major rail and road center near the border. Today, a battle is building there.
The last civilians were ordered out of Lang Son, population 50,000, on Tuesday. Now in Lang Son, 12 miles from the border, the continuous echo of artillery. At a military briefing, the district commander claimed the Chinese still had 5 divisions in areas of Lang Son province. Newsmen had no way of confirming this.
Vietnam's leaders don't seem depressed by the Chinese invasion. In fact, they almost seem spoiling for a fight. They mounted a show of unity for the cameras. Each side has reported inflicting heavy losses on the other. Figures that are hard to verify and seem exaggerated by both sides. But McClear saw some of the Vietnamese casualties.
We did see at a district hospital about 100 wounded Vietnamese troops. It's highly unusual for Vietnam to show military casualties, but this is Vietnam's way of saying that it is the wounded party.
It seems the Chinese are trying to lure the Vietnamese divisions now in place around Hanoi out and into a battle. The Vietnamese are hoping to mire the Chinese down in the difficult border terrain until they can mount a successful counterattack. And every day the conflict drags on increases the danger of a Russian-Chinese confrontation. Jack Reynolds, NBC News.
At the United Nations today, the U.S. called for a special meeting of the Security Council to discuss China's invasion of Vietnam and the whole poisonous atmosphere in Southeast Asia. A report on this from the State Department and Richard Valeriani.
The United States ignored a Chinese request to put off a Security Council meeting, and it now appears likely that a formal session will be held tomorrow. The United States wants the Chinese out of Vietnam and the Vietnamese out of Cambodia, but does not regard one withdrawal as conditional upon the other. UN Ambassador Andrew Young explains some of the thinking behind the administration's call for Security Council action.
I think it's important for us to push this resolution to demonstrate to the world that we are not in complicity with this invasion, that this was not something that was cooked up over here by us, that we don't fully agree that the Chinese ought to take the law into their own hands and with several 100,000 troops try to teach the Vietnamese a lesson.
Officials here fully expect that a resolution calling for a Chinese withdrawal from Vietnam will be vetoed by China, and that a resolution calling for a Vietnamese withdrawal from Cambodia will be vetoed by the Soviet Union. However, these officials believe that the open debate in the Council and the behind-the-scenes deliberations in the corridors might be useful in persuading China and Vietnam to look toward a diplomatic rather than a military solution to their conflict. Richard Valeriani, NBC News, at the State Department.
The Soviet Union has accused the United States of giving its tacit approval to the Chinese invasion of Vietnam. A State Department official told a group of editors today that President Carter had made it absolutely clear to Chinese Vice Premier Deng Xiaoping that the United States was against an invasion. And the President himself today told the editors that the United States would not become embroiled in a fight between communists in Asia, and that the Soviet Union shouldn't either. Judy Woodruff has that story.
President Carter used his appearance before the news editors to make his second defense this week of his foreign policy. He rejected the arguments of critics who have said he should have acted more boldly in recent weeks to protect American interests. Referring to events in Southeast Asia, he warned against what he called oversimplified interpretations.
In Southeast Asia, our interest is to promote peace and the withdrawal of outside forces, and not to become embroiled in conflict among Asian communist nations.
At the same time, the President said when the United States' interests are threatened, he is prepared to act.
We have forces in readiness, as you well know, which we will use if necessary. I hope that that need will never rise.
Administration officials say although they have no military preparations underway at this hour, they have let the Russians know that any move on their part to get involved in the Vietnam-China conflict could have serious consequences. There are a variety of moves the Russians could make, however, and it is not clear at what point the United States would see its interests threatened or how far it's prepared to go to protect those interests. Judy Woodruff, NBC News, the White House.
And with an eye on the Chinese invasion of Vietnam, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee today approved wording on a bill which deals with security for the Chinese nationalists on Taiwan. The bill reads that a Chinese military threat against Taiwan would be considered a matter of grave concern to the United States. That phrase is a compromise, not as strong as some conservatives would have liked. The committee approved it unanimously, but it may face a fight on the Senate floor.
You know why Roman meal bakers like their work? They like the smell when all that bread's in the oven. And they like the idea that they're baking something special. But there's more to Roman meal than good baking. It's what Roman meal's made with. A unique blend of select grains, enriched flour, honey, ingredients that make a delicious light brown bread with natural whole grain goodness. I like that. And this Roman meal bakery thought you'd like to know.
It costs $20,000 to fill one of these seats. That's the average cost of a college education. But Lisa will have a seat reserved because Lisa's parents have enrolled her in the Savings and Loan Foundation College Savings Plan. Now, this plan can actually be tax-free. To reserve a seat for your child, start this college savings plan now at a nearby Savings and Loan. It's the educated way to save.
An official of the new government of Iran said today that oil shipments to other countries will resume very soon. He did not say how much or to whom. At the same time, because of the crisis in Iran, an oil price increase of 5% was announced by Libya, and other countries are expected to raise their oil prices. In the United States, because of the Iranian crisis, Shell Oil and Phillips Petroleum are cutting back on oil shipments to wholesalers. There are reports that in the part of Iran where Kurdish tribesmen live, there has been fighting between Kurds and forces loyal to the Ayatollah Khomeini. One unconfirmed report says 100 persons were killed. And Marine Sergeant Kenneth Krause is safe in a military hospital in West Germany. He was released by Khomeini forces in Iran after a week's imprisonment in which he was kept blindfolded, fed on bread and water. David?
In New Orleans, the striking policemen who disrupted Mardi Gras have now put out pickets hoping to stop the fire and sanitation departments from working. Garbage is accumulating. Most firemen are reporting for work. City officials are angry at union leaders defying court orders and want them held in contempt. The city made what it called a final offer. The union agreed to have a vote on it. Serious crime is about as usual, but shoplifting has become open and flagrant. A rare disease of the brain called Reye's syndrome, often fatal, and it often appears after cases of influenza. Here's our medical correspondent, Robert Bazell.
This child has Reye syndrome, a rare disease of the brain, nervous system, and liver that is fatal in more than 40% of the cases. This year, there have been unusual clusters of Reye syndrome in 5 states, a total of 113 suspected cases in all. Reye syndrome attacks only children. While doctors do not know the cause, they know that it often follows flu and other virus infections. Investigators from the National Center for Disease Control have been interviewing families of victims and testing both the victims and their families in an attempt to determine the origin of the clusters. The best guess is an association with this year's outbreak of Russian flu. But officials at the center say there are no precautions that can be taken against Reye syndrome.
Not really. We don't know what causes it, really, and it's a relatively rare disease in that, like I said, most children who get flu don't get Reye syndrome, and there's really no way of preventing it once it occurs.
Is it contagious?
No. Reye syndrome itself cannot be transmitted from child to child.
Investigators say there may be more outbreaks of the disease since we still have several months left to the flu season. Robert Bazell, NBC News.
In California, a cattle rancher has complained the joint federal-state program to rid his cattle of certain insects by spraying them with a pesticide didn't work out the way he'd been told. About 200 of them died. Don Oliver has a report.
There are dead cattle piled around George Neary's ranch outside Chico, California. He says a couple of hundred have died in the past 2 months. Many died giving birth. Calves were stillborn. There are other cattle the rancher says are about to die. All these cattle had been sprayed with the chemical toxaphene in a program to control the disease mange.
Environmentalists have been concerned for years about the use of toxaphene. It is known to have produced cancer in laboratory animals, and there has long been the fear that it could produce cancer in humans, although so far that's not been proven.
Toxaphene has been found in the running water on the Neary ranch. Tests are being run to see if there is a danger. Neary thinks toxaphene killed his cattle. He blames the state and federal government program.
Working backwards, eliminating other agents, you keep coming back to the fact that the only poison they were exposed to was toxaphene. And indeed, the other animals that weren't treated have had all the same other exposures, and they are prospering.
State veterinarians say the cows not sprayed were bigger, better able to give birth. The state says the cattle did not die of toxaphene poisoning.
Toxaphene is an effective product, it's a proven product, and it's easy to work with. Over the past 3 years, we've treated in the neighborhood of 250 to 300,000 head of cattle with no reported problems.
The toxaphene spraying program will continue while investigators from the University of California try to find out just why all the cows died. Don Oliver, NBC News, near Chico, California.
The planet Jupiter, 400 million miles from the Earth, 11 times as big as the Earth, and a complete change of its seasons, such as they are, takes 12 years. Not much of it could be seen in the past, but now a Voyager 1 spacecraft is passing fairly close to it, a few million miles, and sending back to Earth thousands of pictures. Here's a look at them from Roy Neal in Pasadena, California.
This is time-lapse photography. 240 pictures of Jupiter, taken over a 20-hour period and sent back to Earth by the Voyager 1 spacecraft. They show the planet rotating. 2 of Jupiter's 13 moons, Europa, then Io, appear to fly by the planet. Time is compressed. Each hour shows in 1 second. Thousands of pictures have been received from Voyager 1. They're being studied carefully by scientists using computers. The first real close-ups of the largest planet in our solar system, larger than all the other planets and debris in the system put together. The pictures show greater detail as the Voyager closes in on Jupiter. The most noticeable feature, the great red spot, a huge oval wider than 3 Earths coming into clear focus. There's evidence here, the scientists say, of great storms swirling through the clouds of a hydrogen-rich atmosphere that may be similar to what Earth's was billions of years ago. In the most recent pictures, the moons of Jupiter have shown up, clearly visible for the first time, and the storm formations of Jupiter's clouds are sharply delineated. This is the latest picture, with the moon Io on the left, Europa on the right. Notice the color difference. Io may be composed of salts and sulfur. Europa may be covered with ice. Thousands more pictures are expected as the Voyager flies by Jupiter, coming closest on the 5th of March. Roy Neal, NBC News, at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory.
Hey, what are you feeding that puppy?
Dry puppy food.
Oh, ain't you got no feelings?
I'm a very sensitive person.
Why don't you feed him a moist puppy food with meat, like Gaines Puppy Choice?
Doesn't dry puppy food have meat?
Oh, no. The Gaines Puppy Choice has meat byproducts and real meat. Puppies love it. And it's easy to digest.
How about giving us some of that?
Well,
Ain't you got no feelings?
Gaines Puppy Choice, the meaty food for your puppy to grow on.
Agent Brent Whitlock talks about family insurance.
You have an obligation to that individual when he buys an insurance policy from you to back up what you tell him. You're selling him a service. It's an intangible. The only way you can prove that you're worth what you say you are, or your company is as good as you say it is to be there when he needs you and provide the service that he deserves.
Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
You know me as Mr. Goodwrench, the professional mechanic who cares about your GM cars. But your participating GM dealer also has a Mr. Goodwrench who cares at the service write-up desk and in the parts department. We're all over the service department, just to be sure your GM car gets Mr. Goodwrench professional care.
You never had it so good.
Keep that great GM feeling
With Mr. Goodwrench.
That's us.
and genuine GM parts.
I've got something here you're really gonna love. Trust me, trust me. It's new Wonder Bond glue. With Wonder Bond, you can glue glass, china, plastic or metal in just seconds. And one drop of Wonder Bond is strong enough to hold up to 5,000 pounds. You still don't trust me? Then trust this. It's from Elmer's. Stick with a name you can trust. New Elmer's Wonder Bond.
Our segment 3 this evening. This morning, for the first time, the U.S. House of Representatives allowed television coverage of itself in a regular session. But the television was its own. The cameras are owned and controlled by the House itself, and any news agency wanting to use them has to use what the House puts out or nothing. There is some grumbling about that, about what amounts to the House covering itself. Details from Chris Wallace.
The hour to which the House adjourned having arrived, the House will be in order.
It was exactly 11 a.m. today when the House entered the age of television. From a control room in the basement of the U.S. Capitol, technicians took the first pictures on the new House broadcast system.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman yield?
I'd be delighted to yield to the gentleman from Texas.
I should like to congratulate the gentleman from Alabama.
There wasn't much to show today. The main business, the House approving an official march for the U.S. Merchant Marine.
The adoption of the resolution is amended. All those in favor say aye, opposed no. The ayes have it.
And the TV system is still being checked out. This broadcast went only to congressional offices. But in about 2 weeks, the House will make its coverage available to the 4 television networks and to cable TV systems across the country. As one New York cable company is already advertising, the House of Representatives will be coming into your home. Along with all the excitement here about the new system, though, there are also some serious disagreements, like the fight over who should operate the 6 remote-controlled cameras in the House chamber. Concerned that the networks would focus on empty seats or members sleeping, the House bought the $1.5 million system and pays the 12 people who run it. And it has told those people to stick to the debate. No shots of members listening or even applauding. The commercial networks don't like that, and 2 of them say they may not use the House coverage. But NBC says it will, and it expects its competitors to do the same.
It is quite literally the House covering itself, and we don't accept that as the proper way for news to be covered. However, genuine news is going to be made, and we are not meeting our duty as journalists if we have a piece of news and don't share it.
If the TV setup has the networks angry at the House, it also has congressmen angry at one another. New House rules prohibit members from using the broadcast for political purposes. But North Carolina Congressman Charles Rose, who supervises the TV system, says members will be allowed to send videotapes of floor speeches back to their local television stations. Some members see that as an advantage for incumbents at taxpayer expense.
It obviously becomes just one more political tool to aid them in their efforts for re-election. And that is not the purpose, I repeat, of televising the proceedings of the House. It is to acquaint the public with the public's business.
If a member sends a tape of himself on the House floor back to his local TV station, isn't that political?
We must have greater access to our constituents to communicate with them what we're doing in Washington. If they think we're wasting their time and their money, they won't continue to re-elect us.
While House TV broadcasts are still a matter of some controversy in Washington, they are already part of the political landscape here in Ottawa. The proceedings of the Canadian House of Commons have been televised for 16 months now, and it's a pretty good show.
Order.
The minister just an hour ago.
The honourable member have a question.
Here, too, the House controls the coverage, but it is far more elaborate. At $5 million, triple the cost of the U.S. setup, and each day the Canadians send out 200 videotapes of floor action without any controversy. There is another big difference. As members of Parliament, Prime Minister Trudeau and his cabinet must answer their colleagues' questions every day, which often makes for good television.
I realize that you might want to recognize the Right Honourable Gentleman from Prince Albert. He had a tough time this morning, I understand, with the member from Rosedale, but that's no reason to take it out on me.
The Speaker of the Canadian House says television has brought Parliament and the people closer together.
It means that the democratic system is functioning the way it was designed to function, in the view of the public, that these decisions, these questions, these answers are taking place in front of the citizens and the taxpayers whose money is being spent by virtue of these decisions. That's the way democratic government is supposed to work.
Now, the U.S. House is also in the TV business. Some congressmen worry that members will grandstand for home consumption. Others hope that the wide exposure will make the House do a better job. But the fact is, no one here knows what will happen when voters get to see what their congressmen do every day. Chris Wallace, NBC News, the Capitol.
This morning, our tour includes Greenwich Village.
Hey there. Guess who needed Nitol last night? Guess who had trouble falling asleep? Well, that's why there's Nitol. On those occasional nights when you have trouble, Nitol can help make you drowsy so you can fall asleep. Come on, America. Stop yawning. For occasional sleeplessness, remember, Nitol.
It's a tough life for nails. They need help. New Fabionail Protective Nail Color by Revlon fortifies weak nails, helps make brittle nails more flexible. Clinical tests proved it. Fabionail helped 8 out of 10 women improve their nails. Fabionail, exclusive Revlon color and protection in one patented formula and a money-back guarantee. Try it and discover how beautiful tough can be.
Natural gas. There's still a lot underground. But how do we find new sources? 1978. This terminal opened to receive liquefied natural gas from overseas. 1988. Target date for turning coal into clean gas energy on a large scale. The 21st century could bring gas made from seaweed, from ocean water and sunshine. The future looks bright.
Briefly today, at Camp David, Egyptian and Israeli negotiators agreed to discuss their remaining differences as a package and not one subject at a time. Afghanistan is to lose a substantial amount of American aid, somewhere around 70% of it. That cut ordered by President Carter following the killing there of American Ambassador Adolph Dubs last week. And in Washington, the Commerce Department said revised figures show the country's economy improved considerably in the last quarter of 1978 because consumers spent a lot of money at Christmas, borrowed more, and spent that as well. David?
And finally, fun and games on the campus at the University of Wisconsin. A group of students ran for leadership of the student government, making all kinds of outrageous and ridiculous promises, such as moving the Statue of Liberty to the Wisconsin campus. And perhaps to their own amazement, they got elected. Here's Al Johnson in Madison.
It's really chicken wire, lumber, and painted plaster sitting on a frozen lake near the University of Wisconsin campus in Madison. It's the fulfillment of a campaign promise made by the leaders of the Student Government Association who campaigned for office as a bunch of clowns. However, some student leaders don't think it's funny.
I think it's an outrage that back in November they can turn down a rape prevention group claiming they have no money and then in February spend $4,000 on a Statue of Liberty. It's just ridiculous.
This is the office of the Student Government Association, where decisions are made on how to spend the $80,000 Student Activities Fund. The association openly admits squandering money. It gave a 1-cent tuition rebate to students, cost $300. It bought toys for the association, cost $500. And there are what's called secret plans to flood the football stadium here and hold mock naval battles. This is how some people on campus feel the dean is handling the situation. The dean says,
I would wish that they be spending their money elsewhere, but they are, and I think people tend to forget this, they are the elected representatives.
The elected leaders say they are just keeping campaign promises.
We promise these things, we deliver. We promise we keep our feet on the desk, we'd abuse the powers of the office, and of course we have abused the powers of the office, of course we have given bribe.
Politicians have taken graft from time immemorial, and we will continue in that tradition. We're the people who do boondoggle projects.
This boondoggle will have to be torn down before the ice on the lake melts. Al Johnson, NBC News, Madison, Wisconsin.
From Washington, thank you and good night.
And from New York, until tomorrow, good night for NBC News.
I use my muscles hard every day, so when they're sore, I hurt.
And Absorbine Jr. is one of the best medicines we know to help relieve sore, aching muscles.
You just rub it in. The warmth soaks in deep.
Loosens up my sore, stiff muscles.
Feels good, hon?
Hey, feels great.
And work or play, Absorbine Jr. helps keep your muscles on the job. Get Absorbine Jr. It's strong, sore muscle medicine.
Many dangerous home fires start at night when you and your family are sound asleep. Now there's a smoke detector that can wake you and light up the way to escape. The new First Alert with Escape Light. It's from Pitway, the professionals in home alarms. If there's a power failure, First Alert's Escape Light may be your only light to lead you to safety. The new First Alert smoke detector with Escape Light. This light and sound could save your life.
Tomorrow morning on Today, an interview with an airline pilot who was one of the American heroes of the Iranian crisis.
On Little Women, the brothers-in-law have a bitter quarrel and the sisters struggle to reunite the family.
Would do anything for the sake of this family.
Then the death of a girl following an operation leads Quincy into a head-on battle.
You were in no condition to perform that abortion. You were drunk. You're a liar.
Little Women, followed by Quincy, then Women in White, tonight on NBC.
My mother was a teacher in this school for over 15 years. I know all of the love and the hard work and the caring that teachers put into the jobs, but I also know that our educational system is not giving our kids the best possible chance for a safe and secure future. That's why I propose that our schools get back to the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Terry McBrayer's program for education. He'll put into action what others can only put into words.